I'm going to spend some time tonight talking a little bit about always the fun question that we get to talk about. I remember lobbing this question over to the Democrats when they were in the majority quite often. What have you accomplished? You do a bunch of messaging bills and none of it gets passed in the Senate. And now that we've had the opportunity to be in the majority for less than a year as it comes up on the end of the year here, it's good to take a moment to think about what have we accomplished? Well, can we answer that question? What do we need to do to address any criticism that may be out there? Have you accomplished enough? Washington's a tough place. And I look forward to getting this as a chance to look back on the year and share a few wins. Tried to articulate it here a little bit, but there's always a unique context. And the part that I keep reflecting on is I came to Congress in January 2021 and have been here 3 years. What's important to look at is from 2023, juxtapose that with 2021. President Biden was in the White House. The Senate, for the last 3 years, have been controlled by a Democrat majority. And for the first 2 years of my time here, we have had I would call it a triple majority, when you have the White House, Senate, and the House in one-party control. 2023 versus 2021. Immediately as we entered into the 117th Congress, after the Georgia Senate flipped, which I think was a surprise to the Democrats, was a surprise to Republicans. We'll work to rectify that. But within a month and a half, with budget reconciliation, where it does not have to go through the Senate filibuster because we didn't have the majority in the House, there was a $2 trillion bill passed immediately. A $2 trillion bill that was masquerading as a COVID relief bill. We had addressed the COVID relief bills in bipartisan approach prior to that. There was a $2 trillion bill that got passed. No offset spending, completely additive to the national debt. And within months after that, we saw the fastest increase in inflation that we have seen in 40 years. To the point where you basically wipe out an entire family's salary for a month of each year with the amount of inflation that happened so quickly. Right? That doesn't just happen. That happens because of monetary policy. When you add and you load the system with that type of spending, you immediately get inflation. That's not a Republican saying that. It's not just a Democrat saying that. That is the way economics works. When you load monetary policy and you have so much money chasing so few goods, prices for the American, particularly middle class and lower income Americans, skyrockets. Okay, so just being in the majority, what's taken place in 2023? We curb trillions of dollars of spending. When the majority at that time, the Democratic Party, had the White House, House, and Senate, they can virtually pass any type of fiscally related, budget-related bill that they want without having to go through the Senate filibuster to reach compromise. They can pass a bill on party lines. And they chose within the first month and a half to pass a $2 trillion bill that led to the most rapid increase in inflation that most Americans have seen in their lifetime. You're seeing inflation still high. We're still reeling with the effects of that, but it's leveled off because Republicans are in control of the House of Representatives. Just by being in control of the House of Representatives and the hard work that it took to win back the majority, we immediately curb all of that spending. And it wasn't just the $2 trillion bill. They passed an Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, that was that has nothing to do with inflation, but that was nearly $1 trillion bill. They thought maybe it was going to be $400 to $600 billion. It's now being estimated to be well over that. And what that bill was failed Solyndra-type policy. Look, it's broadly accepted among Republicans and Democrats that an Obama-era kind of kind of a mini Green New Deal with Solyndra and this tax break that was given to that was a massive failure. This isn't just, again, a Republican saying that. That is largely accepted that a, $500 million bill was largely a failure. That's a lot of money, and that's a big failure for a type of policy you're trying to create. That was $500 million. The Inflation Reduction Act, which basically mimics what took place with Solyndra, where you're trying to pick winners and losers in the energy world, was in the range of $400 billion, which is far more expensive than what it was even billed to be. Okay, so by being in the majority, we keep all of this stuff at bay and from ever even reaching the system. That will, with addition of having to raise interest rates as high as we did, will curb inflation. Okay, if I say nothing else, that's an enormous win for what our Republican majority is doing. President Biden had a $5 trillion tax and spend plan, much of which he wasn't even able to accomplish because it wasn't popular enough, even among Democrats, to pass, that we were able to defeat over the last 3 years. But still, that amount of spending got put through. And as I talk about some more things here, that is key. I hope that Americans can understand that by Republicans creating a split government, we make it so that we don't allow a Democratic agenda that's, what was, during the election when it was, former Vice President Biden and current Senator Bernie Sanders, they were going back and forth saying, "Oh, I don't agree with your policies, Senator Sanders. I'm the more moderate candidate. I will be smarter with fiscal responsibility." That was what former Vice President and candidate at the time Biden said. And as soon as he got the White House, House, and Senate under one-party control, they basically implemented a Bernie Sanders-type approach. He probably wanted several more trillion. But to put a $5 trillion tax and spend policy together it was catastrophic, and every single American felt it. Okay, so I could go on and on about the fiscal side of things, it's clear that in order to get our inflation under control, Republicans in the majority is the best thing that we have going for us in the House. We level off that spending, and we try to curb that back down, and I'm hopeful that we can continue to be successful at that. I have a father of 4 young boys. I'm terrified of their future with the amount of money that we're borrowing for our national debt. Each year, what we're having to spend more and more to cover the debt servicing is, it's really scary. Let me take it out of the fiscal side. In January of 2023, Americans were done with COVID. We didn't need these COVID policies to still exist. We needed to move on. Republicans put a bill on the floor to end the COVID emergency that was still in place with President Biden after almost 3 years in the White House. The very week we put that bill, we announced that bill was going to be voted on Wednesday or Thursday. By Tuesday, the White House had announced, we're going to pull that back now. Hey, that type of stuff doesn't happen unless we're in the majority. And we forced the White House to pull back. They recognize it's not popular. Even Democrats were going to support our resolution to end the COVID emergency, and the White House responded. They respond when we push back on bad policy. These things are simple examples, but as you can see, we are in a position to be able to force the Biden administration to accept common sense policy. Another one, Chairman Comer, remember representative from Georgia, Andrew Clyde, they put together some very sensible, well thought out resolutions to push back on the direction that Washington, D.C. was approaching some of their crime legislation and how they were dealing with basic crime in the city. And all of a sudden, we didn't know how it was going to play out, but they put that up. Democrats recognized it. They actually read it, and they thought, this actually makes a lot of sense. We can't be this soft on crime and just by us putting forth that legislation, the White House came out and said, yeah, you're right, we're gonna sign that into law. This doesn't happen that often. Like usually there's just a kind of a, yeah, well, if the Republicans suggested in the House, we're just gonna veto it. No, we're putting forth common sense policies that the American people broadly agree with, and by doing so, we're forcing the Biden administration to come on board. How many times did President Biden say, no, we don't, clean debt ceiling. We're doing a clean debt ceiling. We're not going to address anything in the debt ceiling. Well, the debt ceiling gives us an opportunity to address our fiscal state of our nation. And Republicans stood firm. We put together a really strong bill and sent it over to the Senate and let the White House know that we're going to demand significant changes in our trajectory. So that was met with months and months of inaction from the White House. And what took place after they started negotiations? Well, they recognized that the President Biden was not going to be able to continue to spend like he was. He was going to have to accept that Republicans are going to stand firm to lower discretionary spending. This is the first time in over a decade, maybe more, that we're going to spend less dollars in our discretionary budget than we did the year before. Usually these grow at a rate of 1% to 5%. This is a time where we're actually going to reduce it, saving over $2 trillion in a 10-year span, cutting out that much from the budget, putting caps on it. And then we got that accomplished, and we're working through that process right now. Look forward to finalizing that in the first part of the year and actually realizing those true cuts. So is there bills that we do that we force President Biden to sign? Yeah, I'm actually really proud of that work that we've done. Is there things that we've accomplished here in the House that are historic? Look at H.R. 1 and H.R. 2. They're the two best energy and border immigration bills that you've ever seen come out of this place. And if we adhere to it, we would be living in true prosperity with respect to how we approach our energy. We'd be doing it cleaner, safer, with better standards than anywhere in the world. We would be trusting our industry instead of outsourcing that and sort of outsourcing that guilt. I'm okay with Iranian oil. I'm okay if Russia continues to do that. We don't sanction the Nord Stream pipeline, but we sanction our own and we get rid of our own pipelines. It does not make sense. The energy policies of the Biden administration do not make sense. So what are we doing as a majority to push back? Well, we stood firm at the debt ceiling to make sure that we took portions of H.R. 1. We would love for that whole bill to be passed. It's apparently not going to. But we took portions out of that. Some of the worst parts that are going on in our economy right now is this horrible permitting process through these archaic NEPA standards that we stood firm and said, this doesn't go through unless you give us this type of permitting reform. We're doing the exact same thing right now using our majority to, for the first time that I've been here in 3 years, that Democrats in the House and the Senate are saying, yeah, if we're going to move forward on Ukraine, I get it. Republicans are going to stand firm on the border. We are having, 1,000 to 2,000 encounters from the last 3 presidents, Republican and Democrat presidents, mind you. We're over 10,000. The millions and millions of encounters that we've had, we do not have control of our southern border. And Republicans are saying, with our majority, we are going to stand firm, right? That is going on right now, similar to how we used the debt ceiling leverage to be able to accomplish some very good policy changes. It's not easy to be in split government. It's a lot of back and forth and a lot of, this is your fault, it's not our fault, and a lot of name calling, a lot of back and forth on this. Standing firm on the key things that matter to our nation, energy, immigration and border policy that make sense, that are humane. We cannot have the cartels running the border. They are making billions and billions of dollars by taking advantage of policy that's so simple, would actually improve President Biden's approval rating if he would recognize, the migrant protection protocols that were in the previous administration were actually quite positive. They saved lives. They saved our National Guardsmen and women's lives. They saved immigrants' lives. And it's just nonsensical that we can't do it. We're going to use any opportunity we can to do that, and that's how we're using our majority. So I've talked about H.R. 1 and H.R. 2. Those bills should be passed. If they truly went on policy, the Senate would recognize that, and we would have much better outlook for some of the key things that we're doing. But it's not a reality. I get that. But what from those bills can we make sure that we get done? That's the stuff that we're working on. That's where we're pushing our majority. Another one that I've been heavily involved with is, and I think back 3 years ago, it was considered a conspiracy theory that there was any nefarious business dealings going on with Hunter Biden. The media wasn't reporting it. Social media entities were kind of squashing it. They were suppressing this information. This was all during an election year. Fast forward 3 years, you've now got Hunter Biden showing up, not willing to show up to a deposition, but he's here saying, yeah, I did a lot of wrong things, and admitting fully another 9 indictments that have just come out. Would have been more if the investigation wouldn't have been slow played, so that the 2014 and the 2015 tax crimes, weren't covered under a statute of limitation or limited from that statute of limitations. There would be significantly more to be able to prosecute Hunter Biden on. The American people 3 years ago thought that that was just a hoax. If we're not in the majority, if Republicans are not in the majority, there is no admission that what Hunter Biden had done with his business dealings was illegal. There would have been no subpoena power to be able to share that, right? So in the Ways and Means Committee, we have jurisdiction over the IRS, and some very brave IRS whistleblowers came forward and provided some testimony. And we have to keep that completely quiet. We're not publicizing this. These are private meetings. We're not there trying to get clicks because of this. We got hold of this testimony, and we had to be mum about it. We couldn't say a word. From Thursday the week before all the way until Thursday the next week, I wasn't allowed to say a word about it. But we knew on that Thursday we were going to be releasing the whistleblower testimony that basically claims that there was an investigation into Hunter Biden, that the Department of Justice was slow playing it, was giving preferential treatment. There was inconsistencies on how they're prosecuting or moving forward with this investigation. That was to take place on Thursday, where we're going to release all this information. Okay? For the last 3 years, there could have been a plea deal announced with Hunter Biden. It was Tuesday morning. This was to be released on Thursday, but Tuesday morning, all of our phones blew up with a notification that said, Hunter Biden just went into a plea deal. I called our committee and I said, did we know about this? I mean, we're set to release this information, the whistleblower's testimony, on Thursday. Did we know about this? No, we didn't. This just came out. It immediately reminded me of why it's important for Republicans to be in the majority, or what we're doing with this majority. We said, look, we got to end the COVID emergencies. We're going to put a bill on the floor, and within a day, when the White House realized we were going to put a bill on the floor, they decided, you know what, let's end the COVID emergency measures. Well, fast forward to June, when this whistleblower information was going to be released. There was all of a sudden a plea deal on Tuesday before we were going to release it on Thursday. Now, what's happened since? We released that information. It's very credible information. They have gone and they have been vetted over and over again. The information they provided is disturbing. It shows illegality. It shows a connection from Hunter Biden to what extent President Biden, maybe vice president at the time, former vice president in his time from 2016 to 2020 before he ran, to what extent is he involved? There's alias emails. There's WhatsApp messages. Okay? This reeks. The American people recognize that. The vast majority of people say, okay, there really was corruption going on here. And that was to be released on Thursday. We released it on Thursday. That plea deal has fallen through. There has been significantly more allegations and indictments that are going to be posed to Hunter Biden. It was clearly a plea deal that was not sound. And now that the whistleblower information is out there, that we used our Republican majority to release to the public to let them make the decision, we all of a sudden are changing the way that Americans know what's going on with their government. So I get a little frustrated when I hear, oh, what are you doing with your majority? We are creating government accountability. Go look at the commitment to America that we started off, that Speaker McCarthy pushed hard to get ready to go for when we took back the majority. And you can go down the list from energy, pro-growth tax policy, immigration and border, and government accountability. And then also, we created at the first of this term a competitiveness against China. It was very bipartisan, very sincere, no messaging along with it, and they just put out a report on how to go about doing it. And our Ways and Means Committee is working with GSP to incentivize closer allied countries to bolster them up, get them involved in our trade agreements so we can move away some of our manufacturing from China. These are the ways that we're creating productive way forward on how we are on leveraging our majority to deliver for the American people. The last 3 years have been tough to watch on an international stage. National security, foreign policy is something that I get heavily involved in. I have a background in it, and I love seeing our nation, work to solve some of these problems. Our allies in Israel know that they have our support. This has largely been bipartisan, and I've appreciated the dialogue that it's created with our colleagues. Ukraine is in a tumultuous place with the regime of President Putin and what he's done. They have been able to fight back with our assistance. We need to make sure that we don't let, the reality is that we have a border major problem. The fixes are actually quite simple. I still remember talking to Vice President Pence and the process that went through to create a simple policy that said, look, make your asylum claims, but you have to remain in Mexico during that process. That alleviates the pressure at the border, that disincentivizes the cartel activity so they have no real leverage down there. Now they're lying to people saying as soon as you get across the border, you just get lost in the system, but you'll be in America and all will be well. And that's a lie to those immigrants that are coming here hoping for a better future. It's a simple fix. That's all we're asking for. And we're going to require it as we move forward on supporting our friend and ally, Ukraine. But we're taking control. We're making sure our government works, and we're using our majority to solve problems. And so there's a whole bunch of things additional on this chart. And as I look back, I'm extremely proud of the work that we've done over the last year. I'll end with a National Defense Authorization Act. This would authorize $886 billion for critical national defense priorities. That's an increase of $28 billion over the fiscal year, while we are still finding wasteful cuts within the entire discretionary budget. This bill sets the standard for the readiness and modernization improvements that Congress needs to make sure that our defense has what they need to excel. This includes a 5.2 increase in service member basic pay to account for inflation. We can't account for all of the inflation, but like I started with, as we try to level that off using our Republican majority to squash massive funding measures that go off from the Biden administration, we are trying to also increase what we can provide to our servicemen and women. It commits $360 million to bolster housing assistance and child care support for military families and funds crucial military construction improvements across the country. It accelerates advanced radar and technology development to address emerging threats to our homeland, provides DoD with a multi-year procurement certainty to increase stockpiles of critical minerals and rare earth elements. And it funds the ground-based strategic nuclear deterrent. The bill also prevents land purchases by Chinese-backed entities and prevents DoD research grants from going to universities that partner with Chinese entities. The NDAA for fiscal year 2024 also includes several conservative wins, such as banning the teaching of CRT in the military, ending the bureaucratic DEI overreach, establishes a Parents' Bill of Rights for military schools, and preventing the military Green New Deal. Not where we need to be establishing energy policy. You can just grab H.R. 1 if you want to establish real energy policy. And this is all, these wins are with a Democrat-controlled White House and Senate. And talking to some colleagues about it, it's like, these are significant wins. Like, when you really think about it, I didn't expect to have so much under such split government. And it goes back to, I remember our leader, Steve Scalise, had said, these are common sense policies. And when you cut through the politics of it, and we can build better relationships with our partners on the Democratic side of the aisle, you can really look through and say, oh, okay, yeah, this makes sense. Yeah, I'm kind of told by my media network this is bad, or some voices in my, back in my primary is, I can't support anything that a Republican does, and then they're like, wait, this is actually quite reasonable, right? Like, we need more of that. We're sincerely trying to push more of that, and that is why we've been able to accomplish so much with opposition of party in the White House and the Senate. And this is just the first 11 months of work. And we look forward to, I know that most of my colleagues look forward to, first, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I hope that we can get back to be with our families, but coming back ready to build on these wins and finish a lot of what we started, to get our fiscal house in order, make sure we have a strong defense, and deliver for the American people. And that's something that is what every single one of us, regardless of party, wants. We differ on the approach many times, but we want the same end goals. And I urge my Democratic colleagues to recognize that the stuff that we're putting forward is truly common sense, and to not let politics continue to get in the way. And as we approach how you navigate and get that done in a crazy political system like we have, the common sense will win out. And I'm really just thrilled, and I'm proud of my colleagues to be able to emphasize and show what we've done. I look forward to again building on these, and as we wrap up the NDAA this week and look to finalizing the funding for much of this, let's continue to keep the American people at as the guide on what we want to accomplish, not our own personal political endeavors, but to truly know what's best for the American people, and we can do a better job of that. We as a Republican majority will continue to deliver with those types of common sense policies. And Madam Chair, with that, I yield back.